Have you ever felt that you need to do more just to be loved? That your presence only holds value when it perfectly fits someone else's expectations? We live in an age where light floods every screen, yet the soul quietly sinks into darkness. Every tap, every scroll whispers the same message. You should be more perfect, more beautiful, more pleasant, more agreeable, until you no longer know who you truly are. In the machinery of modern life, a subtle wound festers. We bargain pieces of ourselves in exchange for validation. Carl Jung once said, one does not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. And it is precisely in those hidden places of the unconscious, the places where you felt unloved, abandoned too much, or not enough, that the seed of freedom lies dormant. The truth is this: you were never merely a choice, you are a symbol of something far deeper than likes or compliments. You are a symbol of the self, that sacred center of the soul that Jung called the goal of all spiritual striving. Yet sadly, most of us were raised not to show up as we are, but to conform. As children, we were taught how to behave, how to please, how not to disturb. And in doing so, we learned to amputate ourselves. We learned to smile through pain, to stay silent when hurt, to compromise in love, just to hold on to fragile connection. But what is the value of connection if it demands you betray yourself? If you feel like a product waiting to be appraised through the gaze of others, you are not alone. But you are also not trapped forever. Jung teaches us that the true self cannot be chosen by the external world because it is not a commodity to be weighed by logic or expectation. It is a sacred experience, a homecoming to the truth of who you are. And that is why this video exists. Not to make you more valuable, but to remind you that your value was never up for debate. It lies in your presence. You hold your own crown. You are the symbol Jung called the mandala, whole, indestructible, divine. But to live as a symbol, you must stop playing the part of someone's option. You must stop proving. You must learn the sacred art of withdrawal so your energy becomes rare again. Because that which is easily accessible is never seen as sacred. Pay close attention to the thoughts that arise when someone leaves you. Notice your reaction when you receive no reply. This is not deficiency. This is the map of your healing. When you dare to face that shadow, you begin one of the most sacred journeys Jung ever described: individuation, the process of becoming your true self. Let this video be the beginning, not of a self-improvement project, but of a profound remembrance you were always a symbol. Have you ever looked into someone's eyes and wondered, am I good enough? That is not a question. It's the cry of a part of your soul that was lost long ago. And you are not alone. Almost all of us, regardless of culture, have been taught the same belief that value must be earned, that we must strive to be worthy, that we must fit in to be chosen. Carl Jung called this the enchantment of the persona, the mask we wear to gain acceptance from the world. But behind that mask lies a profound loneliness, the loneliness of not knowing who we are without someone else's gaze. In a world where everything is measured by views, likes, matches, and follows, it's easy to mistake value for a marketplace game. That if we are beautiful enough, clever enough, sweet enough, seductive enough, then we'll be valuable. But that's an illusion, because if your worth depends on others' recognition, then it was never really yours. True value is not loud. It does not advertise. It does not pose to be picked. It simply is. Like a mountain, like a symbol, like what Jung called the self, the sacred center of our being beyond all definitions. Now I want you to imagine this: a lump of gold lying quietly in the deep earth. It does not shine. It does not scream. It does not beg to be discovered. And because it does not try, it remains whole. Then one day someone with vision will recognize it. In real life, most people do not have those eyes. They see only surface brightness. They lack the depth to see within. But that is not your fault. If they cannot recognize your worth when you are raw, they do not deserve your light when you are refined. Jung called this the shadow of the feeling function, the part of us that believes we are only lovable if someone else loves us first. But let me say this clearly: you do not have to become worthy to be seen. You only have to remember that you were never something to be proven. As a child, you learned to adjust yourself to survive. You became attuned to others' emotions. You read the room. You smiled when sad. You stayed silent when hurt. And those behaviors, though once essential, made you forget one sacred truth: you can stop now. You are no longer a child who must please to exist. Now you can choose to stop negotiating your essence. And here is what happens when you stop proving your worth. You begin to walk slower. You say no without explanations. You stay silent when you are not understood. You withdraw your energy from places that once made you feel small. And the world will react. Some people will not like it. Some will call you cold, arrogant, or hard to understand. But that's only because they can no longer control you. You have reclaimed your crown. You've remembered value does not need agreement. It only needs to be expressed naturally. And if you still doubt, ask yourself this. If I already were a symbol, how would I act? What would I say? How would I walk? The answer lies not in strategy. It lies in the return. The return to the truest, most powerful and quiet part of yourself. The part that doesn't need explanation, doesn't need display, doesn't need permission to exist. And that is when you cease to be a choice. You become value itself. Where does true worth lie? You might say in rarity and purity and beauty that cannot be easily reached. But somehow when it comes to yourself, you forget. You forget that your energy, your time, your affection, your presence is a form of luxury. And yet you give it away as if it has no value. You underprice yourself in the name of connection. You say yes when you mean no. You give when you're not being cherished. You stay when you should have walked away. Carl Jung called this the alienation of the self, when your deep inner being is replaced by the hunger for acceptance. You no longer live as a being of intrinsic value. You become a product easily accessible, easily possessed, easily forgotten. But let me say this to you, as Jung once said to himself, you are not an item on a shelf. You were not born to be priced by other people's attention. You do not need to discount yourself in exchange for validation. Luxury isn't about the price tag, it's about accessibility. What happens when you are always available? Always online, always listening, always giving without boundaries. People forget that you are special. They assume you will always be there, and so they stop valuing your presence. Because there is a bitter truth about human psychology. What is easily available is never seen as sacred. In the collective unconscious, we are drawn to what is elusive, deep, and guarded. This is why statues of deities are not placed in the marketplace. They are kept in temples. They are hidden. They require silence to be felt. So do you. When you lower your standards just to be loved, you don't just diminish your self-worth, you dilute your energy. You become cheap, and cheap things get used but rarely respected. Jung taught, where there are no boundaries, there is no soul. That's why you must set limits, not to control others, but to protect the sacredness of your essence. Boundaries are not closed doors. They are energy filters. The awake will understand. The unready will fall away. Yes, some will call you distant. Some will withdraw because they can no longer access you so easily. But that is the proof you are walking the right path. You were not born to be accessible to everyone. You were born to be recognized by those who have the eyes to see the soul. Your silence is a filter. Your non-reaction is a declaration. Your withdrawal is your way of assigning value to yourself. No need to explain. No need to justify. No need to fight. Those who can truly see will see. Those who cannot do not deserve you shrinking so they can grasp your light. Imagine this: a king enters the room. He does not introduce himself. He does not raise his voice. His presence is the message. Why? Because his silence is built upon 1,000 refusals to perform for love. You can be that too. Not by becoming someone else, but by stopping the negotiations. By refusing to let your heart be an open store with no lock. Because here's the truth. You cannot be seen as a symbol if you keep acting like a coupon. Jung once wrote, "The self is not something to earn, it is something to remember." You don't need to be chosen. You just need to stop discounting yourself to be more choosable. There is a painful paradox that few dare to admit. The more we love, the more vulnerable we become. Not because love is wrong, but because we haven't yet learned how to love without losing ourselves. Jung once said, love does not unite two people who are incomplete. There can be no true union without the presence of two whole selves. And this brings us to a concept often misunderstood: emotional detachment. At first glance, it may sound like coldness or apathy, but in truth, it is one of the highest spiritual states of the self. It's when you can feel everything: pain, disappointment, longing, without letting any of it own you. That's when you've stepped into a new dimension of awareness. You become the one at the center, not the one constantly pulled by the tides. You stop losing yourself just because someone ghosts you, rejects you, or turns their back. You stop reacting like a storm each time emotions rise. You no longer need to respond immediately, prove yourself instantly, or demand explanations right now. You pause, you observe, then you choose. This isn't emotional numbness. This is emotional wisdom, a form of energetic sovereignty that makes you immune to manipulation. Because you no longer act from your wounds, you act from awareness. When you practice emotional detachment, you send an unspoken message to the world: I can feel deeply, but I am not owned. You learn to love without clinging, to care without controlling, to attach without losing your center. And this makes you dangerous, not in the literal sense, but because you're no longer predictable. People can't push a button and watch you crumble. You become mysterious, grounded, unforgettable. Jung once wrote, "A person with inner depth causes others to fall silent." And you become that person when you can sit still in the storm of emotion without running, without screaming, without begging. Picture this: a figure meditating at the eye of a whirlwind, hair whipped by wind chaos all around, and yet the eyes remain closed, peaceful, not because they don't feel fear, but because they've stopped fleeing from themselves. Emotional detachment doesn't mean you stop caring. It means you become selective about where your soul is allowed to go. It's like owning a rare vintage wine. You don't pour it for just anyone. You reserve it for the one who knows how to savor it, the one who meets you with presence, not demand. And yes, some will misunderstand. They'll call you cold, distant, guarded. But remember this: not everyone deserves to know your depth. Your silence is a boundary. Your calmness is a declaration. And if someone cannot sit with that stillness without discomfort, maybe they were never meant to be in your energy field. So if you're learning to respond rather than react, you're on the right path. If you're learning to walk away from what unbalances you, you're protecting your soul. If you're finding peace in not having to explain everything, you're nearing real freedom. Have you ever experienced something that taught you the art of emotional detachment? Share your story in the comments below so others learning to hold their center know they're not alone. If this message resonates with your journey, subscribe to the channel and continue exploring the soul's depths through the lens of Carl Jung. Carl Jung once said, "Until you make the unconscious conscious, it will direct your life and you will call it fate." Pause for a moment and ask yourself, how many times in your life have you felt you had to do more? Love harder, give more, just to be chosen, seen, acknowledged. How many times have you asked, what did I do wrong for them to leave me? But maybe the real question is, what was I programmed to believe I must do to be worthy? From a young age, we don't just learn how to walk, speak, behave. We are programmed with beliefs about our worth. When love and attention are given only when we're obedient, achieve high grades, or make others happy, we begin to internalize a dangerous message. Love is a reward for sacrifice. And then we carry that belief into adulthood. We become the overgivers, the ones who are too nice, too available, too understanding. We become the emotionally fragile because we learn to beg for love rather than receive it as an inherent right. This is not your fault. This is a program. And like any program, it must be uninstalled if you wish to live freely. Childhood wounds don't disappear, they evolve into relational patterns. The more desperate you are to be seen, the more likely you are to fall into unhealthy dynamics. You attract those who only love you when you're giving. You fear setting boundaries because you fear abandonment. You keep doing more only to feel more alone. Jung called this the shadow of the soul, the part of you that was never loved unconditionally and still waits for someone to come and fix it. But here's the truth: no one can heal what you refuse to recognize. The first step isn't to find someone who loves you right. It's to identify the beliefs you've been carrying. Ask yourself, is love really a reward? Do I need to be worthy to be loved? Am I loving others the way I learned, or from a conscious place within? Shifting from the wounded child to the awakened adult. When you begin to see the old programming, you are no longer its victim. You start to say no without fearing rejection. Walk away without feeling guilty. Stay with yourself without feeling empty. You no longer need to earn your worth. You only need to remember you've always been worthy. Jung reminded us, we do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious. You must face your old wounds, abandonment, judgment, the feeling of not being enough. Not to dwell in the past, but to clearly see. You learn to love yourself the way others once did. And if that love was conditional or absent, you must now rewrite that model. Free yourself from the program by living in self-sovereignty. Once you stop loving from your wounds, you begin to love from the self, that deep, sovereign, unshakable core of who you are. You stop chasing love to feel whole. You stop obsessing over being chosen. You become autonomous, and that is incredibly magnetic. You stop living like a mirror, only reflecting what others want to see. You become a light with your own frequency, your own field, and the right people will be drawn to it. In a world where everyone is speaking louder, trying harder to be noticed, the one who can remain silent and still make the entire room pause, that is the person who lives through presence. Carl Jung once wrote, "Who looks outside dreams, who looks inside awakens." And when you are truly present, you stop being a product of others' gaze. You become the awakened one, the real one. In a world overflowing with performance, what is presence? And Bois. It's not just physical attendance. It's not about being bubbly, chatty, or high vibe. Presence is when your energy arrives fully, even in silence. You don't need to say much, and yet people feel you. You don't need to prove anything, and yet they respect you. It's inner stability, a deep-rooted foundation, the still center of your own vortex. The absence of presence leads to forgettability. Have you noticed the ones who try hardest to be remembered are often the first to be forgotten? Because they're trying to make an impression, not simply being themselves. Meanwhile, those who don't chase, don't need, don't seek are the ones remembered the longest. Because they don't strive to be present, they are presence. Jung once said, "The privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. And to become that person, you must stop performing." Presence is a sacred frequency. It comes from inner alignment, from wholeness, from the absence of performance. When you live from the self, that core conscious essence within your very actions carry a different weight. People feel your spiritual gravity, not the volume of your voice. True presence has a frequency. It makes people pause in the middle of noisy conversations, slow down in a rushing world, look at you not because of looks, but because something in you calls to them. The more present you are, the rarer you become. You are not easily accessible. Not because of arrogance, but because you know the value of your energy. You're not at every party. You don't answer every message. You don't join meaningless conversations. And that makes you truly valuable. Like a rare object, you're not everywhere, but once present, you're unforgettable. Presence is what makes you irreplaceable. Not your knowledge, not your looks, not even your skills. It's the energy you carry when you walk into a room. When you've done the inner work, faced your shadows, moved through your wounds, and stopped seeking validation, you enter spaces not to get attention, but to bring stillness. And in that stillness, you become the one they remember because you touch something deeper than words. And you can begin today. Presence isn't a gift, it's a practice. On the river, practice being silent without feeling awkward. Practice seeing others truly without judgment. Practice entering spaces without trying to impress. The more present you are with yourself, the more real you become to the world. You've walked through the shadows of the human heart. You've heard the echo of the longing to be seen. You've waited for messages that never came, felt yourself disappear in someone else's gaze. But in that loss, something began to awaken. You started to feel yourself, not as a version stitched together to be chosen, but as a whole being, even in loneliness. Because you remembered no one can strip away your worth unless you give it to them. You are an irreplaceable soul. There is a profound luxury in knowing who you are and not needing to prove it. There is an unspeakable beauty in the quiet, knowing I am enough, I don't need to shrink for love. And it is this wholeness that makes you different. Not because you are perfect, but because you are real. Not because you stand out, but because you stand clear. In a world rushing toward ideals, the one who pauses to listen inwardly becomes sacred. This is the moment you become the chooser, not the one waiting to be chosen. When you realize your value isn't in someone else's eyes, but in how you see yourself. When you understand that love isn't something you beg for, but something you radiate from inner fullness, then you are no longer the backup plan. You are the standard, no longer waiting to be seen. You become the light, and only those who carry their own light will recognize you. Ask yourself, who have I never truly chosen, yet allowed to keep choosing me? If a name comes to mind, it may be time to reclaim the power you gave away. Because when you stop, what doesn't belong to you will naturally fall away. And that space, though painful at first, becomes the place where your soul comes home. If this message touched something in you, leave a comment below. It could be I am coming home to myself, or I'm no longer begging for love, I am loving myself. These words are not just for others to read, they're declarations to the universe, a soul's affirmation I have awakened. And if this journey speaks to you, click subscribe not just to follow a channel, but to remind yourself every time you see it that you are walking the path back to who you were born to be, a soul so deep no one can replace it.